and cold and exposure, no clothes. I've had it all. And I'm not alone. Listen to some other folks who had that. Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, Hebrews 11:32. David, Samuel, the prophets who by faith conquered kingdoms, performed acts of righteousness, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, from weakness were made strong, became mighty in war, put armies to flight. Women received back their dead by resurrection. Others were tortured, not accepting their release in order that they might obtain a better resurrection. Others experienced mockings, scourgings, chains, imprisonments. They were stoned, they were sawn in half, tempted, put to death with the sword, went about in sheepskins, goatskins, destitute, afflicted, ill-treated, wandering in deserts and mountains and caves and holes in the ground. Not only Paul, but a lot of other folks, great heroes of the faith, have endured these kinds of things. Does that break the bond of Christ's love for his own? When we struggle with those kinds of things, does he stop loving us? No. In fact, verse 36 says, we expect it. This stuff is supposed to come just as it is written. I mean, Jesus said it, didn't he? In this world you shall have what? Tribulation. In John 16, he says they're going to take you prisoner, they're going to bring you before their councils, they're going to take your life. This is what it says. And Paul quotes from Psalm 44:22. For thy sake we are being put to death all day long. We were considered as sheep to be slaughtered. All the saints have endured that. That's not surprising. That just kind of goes along with belonging to God, because the hating world is going to persecute the Lord's own. Listen to the words of Jesus in Matthew 10:37-39. He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. He who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. He who does not take his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. He who has found his life shall lose it, and he who has lost his life for my sake shall find it. It could cost you your family. It could cost you your life. And all the saints through all the ages have endured this. Let me tell you something. If that drives someone to reject Christ, they were never his. They went out from us because they were not of us. If they had been of us, they would have continued with us. But they went out from us that it might be made manifest they were not of us. 1 John 2:19. For thy sake, back to verse 36, expresses a willingness. God's people, for his sake, Christ's own, for his sake, are willing to suffer. Listen to Luke 9:57. As they were going along the road, someone said to him, I'll follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, the foxes have holes, the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. That's interesting, isn't it? Somebody comes along, and some would-be disciple, and says, oh, I'm impressed with you. I'll follow you wherever you go. And Jesus doesn't say to him, well, I'm headed to a kingdom and glory and power and riches. He says, well, I probably ought to tell you, I'm homeless. I can't offer you anything. This is really basic in discipleship. He offers us in this world persecution, tribulation, suffering, alienation. We are the offscouring in that sense. It is a willingness that Christians have, a willingness to go all the way to death. Listen to Matthew 16. Verse 24, if anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life shall lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake shall find it. You come to Christ acknowledging a sacrifice, a willingness to suffer. When true Christians face these things, they don't abandon their salvation. It's just part of it. True believers persevere. It's a great truth. And Paul says that. Look at verse 37. No, he says, but in all these things we overwhelmingly what? Conquer through him who loved us. In all our trials, in all our persecutions, in all our temptations, tribulation, distress, persecution, famine, nakedness, peril, sword, in all of that, we don't just barely eke by. We are triumphant. we are victorious. The trial works to our greater good, as we've seen. Those kind of trials in our lives make us humble, drive us to God, expose us to greater grace, break our self-confidence and make us powerful. They enable us to strengthen others. And so he says, we overwhelmingly conquer, not in our own strength, but through him who what? Loved us. See, when we're going through all of that, he never lets go. He loves us all the way through that, and he holds on to that. It is an unbreakable bond. Paul wrote this during a winter in Corinth. And neither Paul, I think, nor the Romans could know how short a time would elapse before they would stand in need of this very comforting truth. Paul himself would be killed by a sword, a Roman sword. And his readers were men and women whose blood would soak the sands of the great Roman amphitheaters under the massive Roman persecution. But the honor of Christ was safe in their keeping because they were safe in his love. And he would never let them go. And he would give them the strength to endure and to persevere. And he would give them the faith to be sustained through whatever came, and an undying love for him. They didn't need to fear to die. They didn't need to fear being mauled by wild beasts. They didn't need to fear being soaked in tar and then told to deny Christ, or they would be lit as torches in the gardens of Caesar. They didn't need to fear fighting with gladiators. They didn't need to fear fighting beasts. And they didn't need to fear conflict with hell's demons. They were safe in the undying love of Christ. Those who abandoned their faith never belonged to him. Never. His love is an everlasting love. He loves to the max, and there is nothing, absolutely nothing, that can separate them from that love.
That's John Macarthur, proving from Scripture that God never revokes the salvation that he grants. Today's lesson is a part of his current study on Grace to You titled The Grip of God. Along with teaching here on radio, John also serves as president of the Master's College and Seminary, both in the Los Angeles area.